So we went to the president and we went to DEI and we went to the administrator saying, well, hang on, if you're going to discipline speech, if it is offensive to minority groups, then you should apply that standard to Jewish people. And the answer we got was what do you want us to do? He has a First Amendment right. That is blatantly discriminatory.
Does Harvard hate Jews? Do universities hate Jews? Does the world hate Jews? In this week's episode, the young yet articulate Shabbos Kestenbaum, a student at Harvard, talks about why he spoke in front of Congress, what is actually going on at college campuses, and why he is suing Harvard University. You'll also hear how all this is creating a giant shift in the world and how it personally and emotionally affects Shabbos, which was honestly very moving. This episode is powered by our favorite software company, Bitbean, the best place to get your threads, Twillory.com, the supreme company to get your super affordable staffing, hiring for less, and the largest Torah spreading organization in the world, Torah Anytime. This episode is in memory of Shimon David ben Yaakov Shlema, as well as Miriam Sarah bas Yaakov Moshe. Here we go.
I'm Yaakov Langer, and you're listening to Inspiration for the Nation.
Thank you very much, Shabbos Kestenbaum, for coming here. You've made your way around like real interviews and real like TV stations, so this is probably like a walk in the park for you.
Definitely less intimidating than being in front of Congress. Yes.
Right. Okay. So we'll get to Congress and we'll get to like everything you've been up to. But first, I would love to like delve into your background a little. We were talking a little before this, and you told me a few fun facts about your family. Let's start off with like where your parents are originally from and how you got to America.
Yeah, sure. So my parents, and I hope they're watching, are they're immigrants. I'm a first generation American. They're both from the UK. My dad, very much straight out of a movie, he came to the United States 30 years ago to chase the American dream, and he started his own business, the first auction house in America specializing in rare Judaica, rare Jewish books, which continues to this day, Kestenbaum & Company. So I grew up in a house where every single wall was covered in 16th, 17th century Jewish books. And my mom similarly loved the United States and wanted to live here. And she's been in education, specifically early childhood education, for close to 2 decades now. But they always raised me to be a proud American and a proud Jew. And I never really saw those two as contradictory. So my dad raised us in a religious setting, and to be really proud of both of those identities.
And your father used to be Chabad?
Yeah. So back in the day, my father learned in Brunois, which is sort of the Harvard of the Chabad yeshivas, back when Harvard meant something. And yeah, he, I think it was the 70s or 80s, he very much felt after the Lubavitch Rebbe asked for people to print the Tanya, the magnum opus of Chabad Hasidic philosophy, he went and printed them in Pakistan and India. And it's funny, he has in his wallet, dozens of dollars that he got from the Rebbe. And yeah, not anymore, but he used to be an ardent Chabad Chassid. And I think some of that has sort of seeped into me and my siblings, just an appreciation for Chabad and everything that they do and the philosophy behind it. So it's been a really fascinating journey to like blend Chabad Hasidus, religious orthodoxy, and American patriotism.
It's interesting because you are following his footsteps because you printed your own Tanya in Auschwitz?
In Auschwitz-Birkenau, yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So I go to Poland a lot. This is separate from Harvard and separate from, suing the university. I just have always felt a connection to Poland, which is a little strange. I remember when I was an 18-year-old, I always wanted to go to Poland. I'd always been fascinated with the Holocaust and Holocaust studies. And my parents always said, you have to wait till you're 18. You have to wait till you're 18. And when I was 18, I was in yeshiva at Aish HaTorah. And there was a trip that they were putting on, and they did it through Heritage Tours. And Heritage Tours, their tagline is Heritage Tours because you'll only do this once. And I went to Poland, totally fell in love. And then the next year said, can I do it again? And they're like, well, no one's really asked us to do this again, but if you're willing to pay, go for it. So I went back a second time. And, now 6 years later, I've been back close to 20, 25 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel like we should have an intervention here. Like,
yeah, exactly. I'm addicted. It's not good.
It's beautiful what you're trying to do, but this is getting very creepy. You're going back to Poland
It's
too
a
much.
little weird. I actually spent last year, my birthday, in the town of Auschwitz. Auschwitz is not just a concentration camp, but there's a town of like 30,000 people who live there. And I happened to have been there on my birthday. So anyways, I'm very involved with the Jewish Community Center of Krakow, Rebuilding Jewish Life, and also the Chabad of Krakow. And they had last summer, actually on Tisha B'Av, which is, the saddest day of the Jewish year, when we lament the destruction of the temple, there were 3 Chabad Hasidim from Israel who came specifically to print the Tanya in Auschwitz on Tisha B'Av to prove that, the Jewish people live and this does not define us. And I basically said, well, can I come with? Because to me, that was so extraordinary that they would do this very explicit and public testament to the strength and the vitality of the Jewish people. And so I went and we drove into Auschwitz and I got special permission, and they had printers attached to a car, attached to a motor. And for a couple of hours, they were printing the Tanya, and they printed about 100 that we gave out to the Jewish community in Krakow. But it was probably one of the coolest and most powerful and meaningful moments of my life.
That's incredible. And I have a little more anecdotes about your life and interesting things, and we'll get back to it. But I want to dive right into your experience with all the craziness going on. So I guess maybe paint the picture of like a little before you got into Harvard. Where was your mindset? Where did you see your life going, and what is going on today?
Yeah. So before I got into Harvard, I was working in Jewish education, primarily at SAR, which is where I went to high school, and through NCSY. And I realized that I went to yeshiva for 2 years, Aish HaTorah, and I certainly had a strong background in terms of my religious identity, but I didn't feel like I knew enough about the academic study of religion. And I'm not necessarily encouraging people to do that. It's certainly unorthodox in all of its definitions. But I felt that I sort of owed it to myself now while I was young. I wasn't married, am not married, don't have much responsibilities, that I wanted to take my appreciation and love for religion and apply it to a secular perspective. And I figured I would do it really only at a place where it would make sense to do it, because it's not a very practical degree. You can't get much out of it professionally.
Oh, who's that billionaire? Oh,
he studies theology. Like, no one does that. So I figured it would only make sense if I do it at Harvard. And lo and behold, I got in. Funnily enough, I actually found out I got in at Auschwitz-Birkenau.
Dude, you found out everything at Auschwitz.
Yeah,
You're there your whole life.
It's a place to be these days. So not only did I find out I got in Auschwitz-Birkenau, but I also found out that, not to sound cocky or brag, but I got a full scholarship.
Oh, wow.
And that to me was incredibly meaningful, because I was about 50 feet away from the gas chambers.
Wow.
And to think that, 80 years ago, Jewish people were in this state, and now we're at the top echelons of academia. And it's not about me. I mean, there are plenty of other qualified and significantly more qualified people than me. But I told my dad just this feeling of tension of being at Auschwitz, but also in some cases celebrating, because this was really important to me. And he was actually really supportive and said, no, it's dafka, it's specifically here that you should find out that you were accepted. So I was really excited and passionate, not just about learning from other cultures and backgrounds and beliefs, but also believing that I can contribute to that conversation. I could show them my Orthodox background and what makes me so passionate about my religion. And as we'll talk about very quickly, I realized I wasn't able to do that.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Okay.
And this is, you realized this before October 7th? How?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so tell us about that experience.
Yeah, people always make the mistake of asking, what was anti-Semitism like at Harvard after October 7th? And the reality is, number one, it was always there. It always was. But number two, it wasn't even after October 7th. On the night of October 7th, Mamish, on the night, I know I'm Orthodox, and maybe I shouldn't say this on air, but I was told, because of the situation, to use my phone, which I'd never done before in my life, to contact my loved ones. I have 4 siblings who live in Israel. I have my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. As I and other Jewish students were locating our loved ones, we had 34 student groups representing more than 1,000 students. These are our classmates. These are people we sit next to. In some cases, these are professors we learn from. They put out what they called an emergency statement to blame Jews for the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. That was on October 7th. So there was no post-October 7th. We were immediately thrusted into this position of having to defend not just our right to be at Harvard, but defend the Jewish people. And to say that this is so outrageous, this is so immoral, this is so ethically bankrupt. So immediately we were thrust into that. But I'll just give you a quick anecdote of pre-October 7th anti-Semitism. Harvard, rightly or wrongly, disciplined speech literally the whole time. Okay, they make it their business to regulate and to prohibit speech that they find offensive or derogatory to minority groups. It's just how they operate. And in fact, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expressions, FIRE, they ranked 248 universities when it came to free speech. And Harvard, lo and behold, ranked 248th, dead last when it came to free speech. So it made it really bizarre that when the Harvard Palestine Solidarity Committee invited Muhammad al-Kurd, someone who says that Jews we eat the organs of Palestinians, that the Israeli occupying forces have internalized the ways of Nazi Germany, and lamented on Twitter that Palestinians can't hijack planes anymore, we felt it was really weird that he was invited to speak at Harvard for the second time. So we went to the president and we went to DEI and we went to the administrator saying, well, hang on, if you're going to discipline speech, if it is offensive to minority groups, then you should apply that standard to Jewish people. And the answer we got was what do you want us to do? He has a First Amendment right. That is blatantly discriminatory. That is objectively anti-Semitic. And as we will prove in court, that is illegal.
Wow. Okay. What was your emotional feelings when they told you that? Like, yeah.
Shocked. When I got accepted to Harvard, my initial reaction was not great. Now I can sue them for anti-Semitism. My reaction was great. Now I can study and learn and research all the things I want to do. But this was my first month of being a Jewish student. My first month. And they're making very clear double standards. And it really underscored this pervasive anti-Semitism. It was a known fact that swastikas were being drawn on campus. It was just being covered up and being downplayed by the university. It was a known fact that every year during Israel Apartheid Week, there was offensive Holocaust imagery that is trying to equivocate the treatment of Jews by Nazi Germany to the treatment of Palestinians by Jews today. These were things that were happening for years. You know, I don't think people realize that the Harvard president, President Lowell, a couple of decades ago, had official quotas as to how many Jews were allowed into the university. Wow. So Harvard right now is going through this reconciliation with race. They're spending tens of millions of dollars to study the legacies of slavery at Harvard. They've renamed, it used to be called the Masters of a House. That was like the resident advisor, the RA. It's not called a master anymore because that's offensive to African Americans. And fine, you should do that. But then don't also have the name of one of the buildings where Jewish undergrads live in to be named after a president who said that there were too many damn Jews in the country. Because if you only champion the causes of one minority group, but not the causes of other minority groups, then that's blatantly anti-Semitic.
What's like, I'm sure the people running Harvard, they're not stupid people, right? Like what do...
Agree to disagree?
No, I'm saying like, what's their game plan here? Like it's so obviously wrong with what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like is there any justification for this?
It's kind of twofold. Firstly, there are two questions I always get asked that I never really have a good answer to. One is that, and the other is how many Jews are actually in Harvard. I don't really know. I can speculate and I can look at the data. The data tells us that at its peak, Harvard was 25% Jewish. Today in 2024, it's about 4% Jewish. It's not because Jews got dumber over time. It's because there was a deliberate and consecrated effort to push Jews out of those academic spaces. And I think, again, anecdotally, Jews were not only pushed out, but people who are anti-democratic, anti-Western, and anti-Semitic were pushed in. If you look at the protests today at Harvard, those who chant globalize the Intifada, Palestine will be Arab, free Palestine from the river to the sea, these people, and I could say this because I know who they are, and I've had conversations with them, they are not academically or intellectually sophisticated. Their arguments are very elementary and very juvenile. It's very difficult for me to say that they got into Harvard based on their academic merits because they just have so little. These are people who are professional agitators or social activists masquerading as academics, but they're really not.
What does it feel like? Obviously, we're seeing, throughout America, so many universities just, with all the tents and all the craziness going on. But for you, I just yesterday on X, Twitter, whatever we call it, you posted a video of people chanting. You tell us about that and like, what's it like to be like a Jewish guy with a yarmulke there, and like see what's going on. So explain what you're seeing and what it's like to be there.
It's crazy. First of all, you guys should follow me on X. I post good stuff on there.
Yeah, we'll share a link down below for everyone to follow.
So on my X yesterday, I posted a video of, it was horrifying, of students and professors, some in full regalia, chanting Intifada, Intifada, come to America. It's not enough for the violent destruction of the Jewish state and not enough for acts of terrorism against Jewish people, but we want that happening in the United States. In fact, many of them don't actually call it the United States. They call it Turtle Island, hearkening back to its pre-colonial name, which is ridiculous for a different conversation. And to have professors cheering on terrorism. The last time the Intifada came to the United States was September 11th. And to have professors and students championing this cause and jumping up and down and clapping with smiles on their faces was so disturbing. And I think whether you're Jewish or not, American or not, you should be morally outraged. And this is a point I always try to make to listeners, to Congress, to the media. This is not just about anti-Semitism, and it's not just hatred against the Jews. It's also hatred to the United States. When we had Shai Davidai, a professor at Columbia, who's really been an outspoken advocate for Jews.
Sure, he's great.
We had him come to Harvard last week, and we had an impromptu rally outside of this, what I call the Harvard Hamas homeless shelter, outside of their tents. And at the end, to conclude the rally, we sang the national anthem, the American national anthem. And we asked all these counter-protests who are wearing their keffiyehs, they're wearing their masks to hide their identities. We said, would you like to join in? Absolutely not. That is a colonial song. Who cares about America? And instead, they chanted the Song of Palestine. And I think people need to be really outraged and really scared about how normalized that behavior has been at Harvard. To sound like an elitist snob for a second, if this was happening at universities that no one really paid any attention to and never really got funding, that'd be one thing. Harvard is the oldest university in the country. It is meant to be at the forefront of discourse and leadership. It trains the next generation of literal American presidents. And if my classmates are those presidents, if they are those thought leaders or religious leaders, we are in a very, very dangerous place. Very dangerous.
We'll be right back to this week's episode, but first, we need to talk about the largest Torah-spreading organization, not only in the world, but in the history of the world. Yes, we're talking about Torah Anytime. Now, our friends at Torah Anytime are having their annual campaign right now. This is the one and only time a year where they ask everyone to come together and participate to help them reach their budget of spreading so many hours of Torah, over 12 million hours a year. I made a large donation because I know how impactful their mission is to the world, and I encourage each and every one of my listeners and viewers around the world to support this incredible organization. Yes, that's you. And when you give a donation to an organization like Torah Anytime, which spreads so much Torah and impacts so many people, it's a great zechus. We all need something in our life, whether it's a shidduch, a child, a refuah shlema, well-being for our family, nachas from our kids, parnasa, whatever it is. When you hit that donate button at Torah Anytime campaign, which is happening right now, I want you to make a little prayer to Hashem and say, in the merit of me donating to such an organization that spreads the most Torah in the history of the world, please Hashem, could you fulfill my request? And then add in what you need. The cherry on top is they're having a really epic raffle for the donors, which I know isn't the reason you're giving, but it's definitely a really sweet bonus. The campaign is ending soon, and you'll have the merit, the zechus of over 12 million hours a year of learning on this incredible and revolutionary program. So go to causematch.com/TorahAnytime or donate by phone with the number 718-682-8111. That's 718-682-8111. But of course, it's probably easiest to go to causematch.com/TorahAnytime. And there's no bigger skula than donating to an organization that spreads so much Torah. I encourage all of you to donate today. We love Torah Anytime, and we want to help keep on supporting them. Please go help. Now, we'll be right back to this week's riveting episode. But do you ever feel like your business software is just meh? Well, say hello to Bitbean, the game changer in software solutions. Bitbean isn't your run-of-the-mill software company. These guys are wizards at creating tailor-made software that fits your business like a glove. Imagine having a tech that not only works, but works for you and your specific needs. That's Bitbean magic right there. What makes Bitbean stand out, they get you. They understand your business, your pain points, and your goals. It's not about coding, right? It's about creating solutions that make your life easier and your business smoother. Need a killer mobile app? Done. Need a robust enterprise system? They've got you. Here's a real-life example. A mid-sized retail company was struggling with their outdated inventory management system, losing track of stock and wasting hours on manual updates. Bitbean stepped in, analyzed the business, and built a custom software that automated tracking and provided real-time analytics. The result? Inventory discrepancies dropped by 90%, and they saved thousands each month. Clients rave about Bitbean's ability to enhance productivity and streamline operations. So, are you ready to kick your business up a notch? Head over to bitbean.com and snag a free consultation. Trust me, you'll wonder how you've ever managed without them. Remember, in the business world, the right tools make all the difference. Go with Bitbean, where your business dreams meet top-notch tech. Now, back to this week's episode. What blew my mind was I saw the video of you talking on some news channel, because you're probably on every news channel now, but you were saying how you wanted to have a conversation with the other side.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I've been in touch. I won't say which organization, but a major news organization contacted me right after October 7th saying we want to model respectful dialogue and debate and disagreement between the two sides. So I'll be, the Jew, I'll be the Zionist. And can you find at Harvard a leader of the Palestine Solidarity Caucus or the Palestine Liberation Group? Can you find someone who's willing to come on air? We're now in May. I have not, this is not an exaggeration, I have not found a single leader within the anti-Israel demonstration, the anti-Israel group at Harvard, who's been willing to come on air to respectfully narrate and showcase their ideology. And I have made it very clear that we are going to end in a handshake. This is not going to entail personal attacks. It's just for you to demonstrate in front of a live audience of millions of people why it is you believe what you believe in. And none of them to this day have been willing to do it. And in my personal capacity, when I reach out to these people, I basically get two types of responses. The first response is just to ignore me. Just don't respond to me. And the second type of response I would say is far more insidious, which is we have no problem debating. But we can't debate your side because we don't want to normalize and we don't want to equivocate that your side is legitimate, that that's an appropriate worldview because we don't talk to Zionists. That's scary.
It's crazy.
And by the way, I don't say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut. I'm not the biggest waving the Israeli flag guy.
Right.
I have siblings who live in Israel and have served in the Israeli Defense Forces, but they would actually be pretty surprised to know that I'm a lot more nuanced in terms of my perspective on the state of Israel. I'm not some brainwashed Zionist. I believe in reasoned debate, and the fact that they can't even speak to me is scary.
I'm so not political, but I'm just curious, like politically, where were you like 4 or 5 years ago, and where are you now?
So I don't want your viewers to get angry with me.
Sure.
I don't want you to get angry with me, but I am the only Orthodox Jew I know of who's voted for Bernie Sanders twice.
Interesting.
I registered to vote as a Democrat on my 18th birthday, and I'm still a registered Democrat. But I would call myself politically homeless because I don't see how I could possibly march with those people anymore, considering how blatant their hatred for Jewish people is. So I'm not willing to make that switch to the right. I'm not willing just yet to abandon my party and my principles, but I don't blame Jews for doing that because I can totally understand why.
So could you walk us through what it was like to speak in front of Congress?
Yeah. Very nerve-wracking. That's first off. So I've been very privileged to give testimony twice, one in front of the House Education Committee and one in front of the House Judiciary Committee, which was just a few days ago. In addition, I've had private meetings with the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, with numerous chairmans of committees. And I want to impress upon you and your audience that this is not about politics, and this is not about partisan points. This is bipartisan Democrat and Republican lawmakers who are coming together and recognizing that what's happening on college campuses pertaining to Jewish people is nothing short of a national emergency. So it's a tremendous honor. I mean, really an honor and a privilege to speak. It reminds me of that quote from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, because I really do see it as a major responsibility to represent not just myself, but thousands of Jewish students across college campuses in the United States. And to be able to give testimony in front of Congress on live TV, yes, it's nerve-wracking, but it was an amazing responsibility, an amazing opportunity. And the outpour of bipartisan support, the most far-right election deniers to the most far-left, whatever the liberal version of an election denier is, all of them coming up to me afterwards saying, this is my number, call me, what can I do to help? What can I do to support you? I've been able to bring Congress members to Harvard. My own congressman, Richie Torres, he's a liberal, he's a Democrat. There's no greater friend to me and to the state of Israel than someone like Richie Torres. I mean, he's just incredible. So I want to impress upon just how bipartisan this is. It's not about politics. It's not about scoring points, but it's about people recognizing that Jews are a fabric of this country. We have, since the dawn of the revolution in 1776, we have played a part in all areas of American life, and we cannot and should not be treated this way.
Could you tell me about your, lawsuit with Harvard?
Yeah. So it's very weird to talk about it because, I'm a 24-year-old. I don't know anything.
I mean, I told you 6 years ago, by the way, you're going to go to Harvard and you're going to sue them. What?
I wouldn't have believed it. It's just
crazy.
It's so bizarre, but it's also such a bad indictment. not just to Harvard, but the state of higher education in the United States, where in order for Jews to receive equity, equality, and justice, we have to sue them. Like, that's so outrageous. So anyways, I realized after October 7th that the anti-Semitism here at Harvard was so pervasive and so systemic that they are not willing to change, or they're unable to change. The only way to do it is if a court of law forces them to do it. So I'm represented by Kasowitz Benson Torres, which is an aggressive litigation firm based in New York. I actually think Mark Kasowitz used to represent Donald Trump, so that's pretty cool. I always joke that me and Donald Trump have the same lawyer, which I don't think is true, but it's still a cool conversation starter. And we're going after Harvard, not because we want to, but because we have to. So we're alleging whole sorts of violations. Number one, a breach of contract. Number two, diminished educational opportunities. Number three, breach of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. And again, I told my lawyers before we filed it, we filed sometime in January. So from October to January, I told my lawyers, look, if Harvard were to change, if they were to implement policies to combat anti-Semitism, if they were to discipline their students, if they would come out forcefully against Jew hatred, then I'm not going to file this lawsuit because I don't want to do it. Right. I'm the only named plaintiff. That's scary. That gives me a lot of pressure. I have to be on my best behavior. I said, we'll just toss it out. If Harvard proves, at minimum, that they'll do something about it. And they just didn't. To this day, they haven't. So the lawsuit, unfortunately, is really necessary. And we're seeking, yes, damages, monetarily speaking, but we're also seeking for federal monitors to make sure that Harvard is in compliance with their federal obligations to make learning about learning, and to make sure that no minority group, no student should feel threatened or feel uncomfortable in their place of learning, or feel unsafe, which is exactly how I feel and how many Jewish students currently feel at Harvard.
There's so many, guys, as I walk through, and girls, that you walk through the Orthodox community, like, oh, that person went to Harvard, that person. And it's a shame because it was always like, oh, it's really cool. It's an honor to be there. And so quickly it shifted. And again, I'm not taking away from, the credibility of people going there and all that, but associating with Harvard, it's become, and a lot of these universities, it's become icky. Oh, they hate Jews openly. Clearly.
It goes without saying. So certainly within the From Orthodox community, Harvard means absolutely nothing anymore. And I've told admitted students and prospective students that as well. The brand name, just thinking superficially, the brand name has been totally tarnished through their own fault, by the way. I mean, They shot themselves in the foot time and time again. So yeah, I think people are a lot more open to places like Yeshiva University, or even just skipping college, if I am allowed to say that, because if you're there to learn and to get an education, you'll be really hard pressed to learn and to get an education. So much of it is about political activism, social activism, masquerading as the most oppressed. And it's just not a comfortable or safe environment for Jews anymore. It just isn't. And by the way, I am happy to be proven wrong. I would love it if people said, what are you talking about? Because Harvard implemented X, Y, Z. I would love for me to be proven wrong and for me to not go on shows and to talk to Congress anymore. But unfortunately, we're now, 7 months out? And I actually think I've only been proven right as the days go on.
It's sad, but I think you're accurate there. It's funny because growing up, I went to more yeshivas than you. And there was always sometimes an undertone and sometimes very obvious rabbeim, being very you don't need, some more extreme than others, but you don't need college. And, but I feel a lot of them are right, they haven't said it.
They're eating this up.
They're oh, you see, they never liked us.
I went to Aish HaTorah for 2 years, and it was a great place. I learned a lot, and go Aish. I remember getting into so many fights with my rabbis because they said secular college, they don't teach you, it's just propaganda, and no one believes in God, and it's just progressivism gone wrong. And I remember arguing with them, saying, what are you talking about? The hallmarks of a higher education are so important. Harvard is a pillar of American society, and you're just being so closed off and so narrow-minded. And unfortunately, I called some of my rabbis a couple of weeks ago, and I said, okay, fine, you may have had a point. But they are loving this. There's never been a greater recruitment strategy, whether it's yeshiva or yeshiva university, to say, well, just look at what's happening on secular college campuses.
Wow, that's crazy. So hold on, back to Aish and Israel. This is more about your personal life. You tried going to the Mir, but your family has an interesting background with the Mir. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so this is a great story. The Kestenbaum family, originally from Poland, from Tarnów. My great-grandfather, who I'm named after, Israel Kestenbaum, was born there. And he had I hope I'm getting the history right. I think I am. He had two brothers, Yaakov and David Kestenbaum, and they moved to the United States. During the outbreak of the war, there was a flood of European Jews who either were leaving Europe or were trying to get out of Europe. And my two brothers, who were successful merchants and had done well in the business world, they started filing dozens and then hundreds of false affidavits to Jews, primarily in Poland, saying, this is my cousin and I take responsibility for him. So much so that the Museum of Jewish Heritage here in New York, they had an exhibition on the Kestenbaum family a couple of years ago. And there were people who reached out to our family in their 90s saying, your two great uncles saved my life, which was pretty incredible. So some of the people that they saved with these false affidavits was the Mir Yeshiva. The Mir Yeshiva, of course, went to Shanghai during the war. And that was in large part due to the efforts of my two great uncles, Yaakov and David Kestenbaum. So after my 2 years of yeshiva, I'm wearing my black hat and I'm saying sa instead of ta. And, I'm learning Gemara all day, every day. And I realized I wanted to learn in the Harvard of yeshivas. I wanted to learn in a place where it would just be learning for the sake of learning in a really intellectually rigorous environment. So I applied to the Mir. And at the Mir, you have what's called a faher, a test, where you prepare 3 pages of the Talmud with the 2 applicable commentaries, Rashi and Tosfos. And I thought I was doing a pretty good job. I didn't say my name was Shabbos because that's a little weird. I said my name was Yisroel, which is one of my other names.
Which we'll get into all your names.
Which we'll get into later.
Okay.
And the Mir Yeshiva, as thanks for my family rescuing them, rejected me.
But you didn't tell.
I didn't tell them.
I think you should have mentioned that.
But I was going to say, but when I got the rejection letter, I should have been like, hey, the only reason you guys are here is because of my last name. But yeah, I was like, what the heck? So I applied again and got rejected again. And the funny part was after the second time, the rabbi who was giving me the test, he after I say over the Talmud and I give what's called a shtickle devar Torah, I say over some words of Torah, he says, are your parents Jewish? And I'm like, yeah. He says, oh, but they're Balei Tshuva. I said, no, like they're Orthodox and they raised me Orthodox. So I don't know, maybe it was something I said, but I was just so taken aback. So I got rejected from the Mir twice and my family saved them. And that's the thanks I get.
Well, I think it's a cool story arc, getting rejected from the Mir, but accepted by Harvard.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting. Okay, so let's go into your names.
My names.
I was going to write it down, but I'm like, I don't know if I have enough ink in here. You have your family. What's the art behind it? Your parents give all you guys interesting names?
Yeah, I am one of 7, so big family. And my parents gave all of their kids very long and elaborate but meaningful names. I'm happy to get into that. So my name, I have 7 names, is Alexander Israel X, Yisrael Yekusiel Yakir Shabbos Kestenbaum. And Shabbos is the one my parents decided to call me by. Some people call me Shabby as a nickname, but my name is Shabbos. I was born on Shabbos and 24 years later, here we are. Hold
on. So X
just the letter.
The letter. Before Elon Musk turned Twitter into X.
I always say Elon Musk stole the idea from the Kestenbaum. So my parents named me X, just the letter.
And as in the Roman numeral? Like what?
No, as literally the letter. It's funny, actually, today is Malcolm X's birthday. I don't know why I know that. But every time I go to the airport, they always say, especially in Israel, they say, what's X? And I say, it's my name. And they say, what are you talking about? What does it stand for? I say nothing. It's really just the letter. And it is. So my great-grandfather who I was mentioning, his name was Yisrael Yekusiel. When he moved to the U.S., he went by Xiel, X-I-E-L. And so to sort of keep on that legacy, my parents gave me the X. And my sister has a B, and my other brother has a J. And I'm the X.
Very unique. And does your father have a very long name? Like when you're getting called up for the Torah, like...
No, I never get called. Once the Gabbis figure out what my name is, I never get called up again. But my dad is Daniel Ethan and my mom is Hadassah Naomi.
Interesting. So. To me, you have the longest name. Have you met someone with longer?
Not yet. But it's funny, people always say like, are you related to Malcolm X?
Right. Professor X.
Professor. So I've never met anyone with a longer name, but more fundamentally, I've never met anyone with the name Shabbos.
Yeah.
So if there are those out there who have the first name, I know it's a last name in some Sephardic communities, but as a first name, I'd love to meet another Shabbos. And because
I know another guy. No, it's Ashkenaz guy with Shabbos. Or sometimes they go by Shabbos. No, the last name. The last name
doesn't count.
But you're the only person with the name Shabbos that you know. First name
I know of, because I get the worst puns and jokes every day. Any joke
Right.
you could think of with my name, I get it. And I want to relate that with another Shabbos. I want there
Right.
to be a community of us. But so far, I can only say this to my therapist. No one else understands.
Yeah, it's a very unique name. But you know what? It's cool. It's unfortunately, I you know what I'm thinking of, and you're not gonna like this. Someone else in history had the name Shabbos, or was
I know what you're gonna say.
the
Shabtai Tzvi.
Yeah, Shabtai Tzvi. It was. I don't now thinking about it. Was that I don't even know if that was his name or that was his nickname.
I don't know.
Maybe it was his sefer that he wrote.
I am not the false messiah.
Right,
for
okay.
those who are wondering.
You have nothing to do with him.
No, that's not on me.
Right.
Okay.
Right. You have more what to do with the actual day of the week, which is awesome and
Yes.
beautiful and most people's favorite mitzvah. So where do you go from here? How much more time do you have at Harvard, and where do you foresee the future?
Sure. So my time at Harvard, thank God, is wrapping up. I say thank God because when I came into Harvard 2 years ago, I really wanted to stay here for as long as possible. I was going to apply to PhD programs, which are 5, 6, 7 years. I really wanted to be an academic. I really wanted to get a PhD. And again, this is pre-October 7th. It dawned on me that academia and the institutions of higher education are so infiltrated with this anti-American poison, with this anti-Semitic poison. I couldn't justify me being here longer than I had to be. So I'm getting out of it pretty quickly. In terms of where we go from here, number one, the lawsuit will still happen. It will still be a thing. A judge is actually going to hear arguments May 30th about whether this goes to trial or not, or whether it gets tossed out. Harvard has filed a motion to dismiss this with prejudice. We're confident that it'll be tossed out because their arguments are just totally meritless and arguably factually inaccurate. But I want to keep fighting. And I, along with other students at other universities who've spoken at Congress, who filed their own lawsuits, who are just passionate about their Jewish identity, we're forming a coalition of young Jews, sort of the next generation of Jewish leaders who not just want to fight back and restore our campuses, but also want to instill and inculcate a passion and a pride in one's Jewish identity. I was not planning on doing this. I'm not good at this. I'm not particularly intelligent or articulate. I'm just a guy.
I think you're intelligent and articulate.
Thank you. But point being, I really didn't see myself in this position, but I sort of had this thrust upon me. I've been given a platform, and I'm very blessed to have that platform. And I owe it to myself and to other people to use that platform for change and for good. So I will always be here fighting for Jews who don't have a voice or feel intimidated or scared. And whether I'm a student or not, I will always be Shabbos Kestenbaum, and I will always be using my platform to fight for the Jewish people and for the Jewish community.
That's really beautiful. We'll be right back this week's episode, and my favorite part is coming up, truly. But first, summer is basically here, and I know you hate sweating. We all do. That's why our special code word INSPIRE will get you $18 off your purchase of $139 or more on Twillory.com on the most breathable polo shirts you've ever worn. I'm actually wearing one of them right now. They're slim, breathable, and can transform you into the best version of yourself stylistically. Oh, and you hate heavy, sweaty wool suits? Well, Twillory's magical ear suit is made out of this kind of technology from the year 3000, and you may never go back to the wool suits in the summer again. Did I mention they're also stretch material? Use code word INSPIRE for $18 off today at Twillory.com. About to continue the episode, but are you familiar with the high cost of local hiring, where hourly rates can soar between $20 to $50? And let's not forget the challenge of finding a skilled employee who's immediately available. But what if there's a more cost-effective solution? Introducing Hiring for Less, your gateway to hiring dedicated, full-time, remote employees from overseas for just $7 an hour, totaling only $280 a week. Imagine having an employee who works a 9-to-5 scheduling aligned with your time zone, equipped with excellent English proficiency and a specific job experience you need. Hiring for Less isn't just about affordable hiring. They've successfully connected employers with remote experts in various fields, including customer service, real estate, bookkeeping, data entry, cold calling, photo, video editing, architectural design, e-com assistance, personal secretarial work, and other specialized roles. But Hiring for Less offers more than just recruitment. They guide you through training and communication best practices, ensuring your overseas employee seamlessly integrates into your team. Plus, there are no binding contracts, hidden fees, upfront costs, or recruitment charges. Simply outline your requirements, and Hiring for Less will match you with a skilled overseas professional for an unbeatable rate of $7 per hour. It's really crazy. Plus, if you mention Living L'Chaim, you'll get a bonus first week employees for 50% off. So call, text, WhatsApp the number 845-682-0990. That's 845-682-0990, or contact them at hiringforless.com. They will blow your mind. Go check them out. Have you found yourself, interestingly, like, because you're in a very unique time in history where, you know, like, hopefully things shift, but like America had a great run for the Jews typically,
Yeah.
and now it's like very blatantly obvious that there's places of hate. Do you find yourself, I don't want to say understanding more because you can't compare it, but you went to Auschwitz so many times. Do you understand on a deeper level, like, what the hate that happened then or throughout history with Jews, like, of what actually happened from just with your own eyes, what you see in front of you?
You know, I'm very careful about making Holocaust comparisons, not just because when I'm not suing Harvard, I'm actually studying the Holocaust at Harvard, but also because my great aunt, may she continue to be alive and well, who lives in Washington Heights, she remembers Kristallnacht. Her father actually is Rav Yosef Breuer of the Breuer Synagogue, and her grandfather is Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch is my great-great-great-grandfather. So there's a little flex right there.
That's right over there.
That's yichus. I couldn't say that in front of Congress, but I could say it in front of you guys. She remembers Kristallnacht quite well. She remembers her father, Rav Breuer, being arrested by the Gestapo. And it's not just history I'm mindful of, but it's this personal familial narrative. I'm not at the point where I'm willing to throw in the towel and say, yeah, we had a good run, but now let's move to South Florida or move to Israel. I mean, South Florida and Israel are great options. If you want to move there, go for it. But I think, number one, it's important that we continue to fight. We can't let them win because they would love nothing more for us to leave the Harvards and to leave the United States. They would love nothing more than that. So it's important we fight. But also, number two, I do think, and this is why I keep mentioning the bipartisan nature, I do think we have friends in important places. There are people who are so genuinely concerned and want to help and want to fix this. We're not alone in this. And I think that's also another critical distinction. Part of what made the Holocaust so horrific was we didn't have any allies. We really didn't. I think it was like the Dominican Republic that would accept us after the Evian Conference, and that was about it. Here we have those in the halls of Congress and those in media, those with influence, those in the business world, in the medical field, in all avenues of life and in American society, those who want to fight for us and with us. I can tell you personally, the thing that gives me the most chizuk, that gives me the most inspiration, that keeps me going, is after I go on, Fox News or after I give testimony, I will get random texts saying, you don't know me, my name is Christian McChristian from South Dakota, and we want you to know that we in our local congregation are praying for you and the Jewish people. And I get that the whole time. That to me is so powerful and is so meaningful. And that's the only reason I'm still in this fight. To know that there are people who are not Jewish, who don't have a personal stake in this, are saying, we're with you, we're praying for you, we're talking to our legislators about you. That's amazing. And we have to recognize those friends and we have to thank those friends. We can't take them for granted. So I don't think the United States is lost. I think we're going through a very difficult time in our country. Very difficult. But when you love something, you fight for it. And that's what we need to be doing.
It's really beautiful. Okay, last question, and this is a super personal question.
Oh, man.
Well, actually, right before I have actually some notes, so we'll get right before that.
Okay.
Before the personal question. You were banned from China?
Yeah.
Tell us about
I've had
that.
a weird life. So before I got into Harvard and did this lawsuit, I was a bit of an amateur activist myself. So for those who know Rav Avi Weiss, I went to Poland with him. We did a demonstration and, we almost got arrested. And then with China, so for those who don't know, it's actually a very sad story. China is actually committing a genocide. People are so focused on Israel committing a fake genocide. There's a real genocide going on in China. They have rounded up millions of Uyghurs. Uyghurs are ethnic Muslims who live in the Xinjiang province of China, and they've hoarded them into, they call re-education centers, and they're basically concentration camps. And I remember during the height of the pandemic in the summer of 2020, I was made aware of this. Someone sent me a video of like Uyghurs being tied up and being forced onto basically what looked like cattle cars. And I said, wait a minute, this can't be, because we Jews went through this. If that's really happening, then we would be at the forefront speaking out against this. And it turns out that really was happening. And it also turned out that Jews weren't really saying a whole lot. So immediately I formed basically a grassroots solidarity campaign, and we organized solidarity rallies and missions with Uyghurs, with people who either escaped concentration camps or had their family members killed by the Chinese government. And we would put on protests and solidarity missions outside of the White House, outside of the United Nations. And I would wear, I don't know if this was so kosher, but I would wear a tallis and I'd have my kippah to make a point of like, I'm a Jewish person. I know exactly what a genocide looks like. This is a genocide. And we want you, the Uyghur people, who we don't have anything in common. I'm not a Muslim and I'm not from China, but I want you to know that we recognize this and we're with you 100% of the way. And as I got more involved, Uyghur activists who themselves are banned from China said, look, we really appreciate what you're doing and thank you so much. You should know, though, that the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, sends spies to our protests. And I said, like, what are you talking about? And they said, yeah, next time we're at a rally, notice there are people in the back recording you. And sure enough, next rally, I noticed that. And they said, you should be very careful because if you ever want to go to China, they might put you on a blacklist. I said, there's no way. Like, I'm a 5-foot white Jew from the Bronx. I'm the threat here. But anyways, I sort of tested it out. I emailed the Chinese consulate and I said that I wanted to apply for a student visa because I want to go to China. And, I made it up. I want to explore your beautiful history or whatever. And they responded literally saying, Mr. Kestenbaum, due to your seditious anti-Chinese actions and behavior, we will not be issuing you any visa for 3 years.
Wow.
And I printed that email out. And along with my arrest record from Poland, it's hanging up in my wall because that's actually a tremendous badge of honor that I was banned from a country for standing up against a genocide. And I'm incredibly proud of that. I am proud of my activism. And it was really, really meaningful. But also a very cool, if I ever go on shidduchim and I'm ever on a date, that's a very cool way to open the conversation.
I feel like you have a lot of easy openers for your dates.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know how to sustain the conversation, but I have a good opener for the conversation.
Great opener. Your names, your experience with Harvard, getting banned from China. China, if you're watching this, don't ban me, just ban him.
Yeah. He's not the problem. It was only me.
I mean, but I'll set up. But you know what you stood up for, I think that's cool. I think that's good.
Thank you.
Okay, so now for the very personal question.
Yes.
Have you found yourself like talking to Hashem or exploring more your Yiddishkeit as you're going through the past few months?
Okay, here's the disclaimer. If you're one of my rabbis from Aish watching, you should turn it off. I am Orthodox. I am proudly Orthodox. I come from an Orthodox community, and I see myself living an Orthodox lifestyle. Please God, when I get married. Here's the controversial part. In addition to what I'm going through personally, I study the evolution of Hasidic thought in light of the Holocaust. How did Hasidic groups, and in particular Hasidic Rebbes, like the Klausenberger, like the Munkacher, like the Kalever, who went through the Holocaust, how did they understand God afterwards? How did they reconcile their experience with everything that God does is for the best? And there are many people like the Klausenberger Rebbe who said that, yeah, everything is for the best, and who are we to question? And there are other people like the Munkacher Rebbe, who does not get enough credit, and I wrote my undergrad thesis on him, fascinating guy, who said, I can't do this anymore. He was religious, he was Orthodox, but he couldn't be a Hasidic Rebbe anymore. And I sort of identify with him a lot.
Really?
I look at October 7th, and I look at the Holocaust, especially because I go to Poland so often, and I not only do I not understand it, and I think most people would say I don't understand it either, but it's hard for me to daven, to pray every day and say, God, you heal the sick, and God, you clothe the naked, and God, you can return the 120 hostages in Gaza.
I hear that. I would love to, and not like argue, because I'm not here to argue, I'm just trying to like understand it more, but I feel like what you're going through is so real and it is happening. But at the same time, it's like there's a logical question that we're talking about right now, and there's an emotional question. So the emotional question of like, let's use a different example. I think it'll be easier. Like if someone, God forbid, loses someone. So if you walk in the Shiva house and then like you say like how the person who lost the loved one, they say like, how could this happen? When they ask that question, there's there's no answer you could give because they're not looking for an answer. So like that's the emotional part to it. The logical answer, I'm making it up because I don't know why that person is no longer alive in this hypothetical, but the logical answer is like, oh, maybe because the bigger picture, they maybe from another life and they had to be in this world for a certain thing and they hit the part in their life where they reached the next level and now they're, so in the bigger picture of the big plan of whatever it is, which we don't know, there is a logical answer there. So in the emotional answer, like I don't even think there's an answer for what you're going through right now. But I do think that like you mentioned, that conversation with Hashem, God, you know, just having that conversation, it makes sense to be so hurt, feeling like that totally makes sense. But in the same time, the logic behind it, again, in a Shiva house, I would never say, why did they get hurt? Like, oh, because they got hit by a bus. That's why they died. Like that would not work.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of things, like it is hard to go through it. But at the same time, like there is Hashem, and the Jews have been through, unfortunately, way worse. Yeah. And I'm not undermining what, like I can't even imagine what the families are going through, like with their loved ones. They're not even sure. Like it's crazy. So I'm not taking away from that. But I'm saying the grand scheme of things, going back to World War II or Mitzrayim, like it was so terrible, and I mean, history is your thing, so you could go through all the other times that it's been so bad and hard for the Jews, and we don't really know. But the light is that Mir Hashem, like we'll make it through. Like we will. We'll be broken. We're gonna lose, and it's terrible. But Hashem is still with us, And as alone as you feel, I know Hashem is there, and He has your back. He has our back, and it's dark. It is dark now, but there is a light. I don't know if that makes sense. I never even went into this place in my podcast. I never talked this much.
Yeah, we're entering a whole new space with living with Chaim.
Yeah, I gotta start a new podcast.
I think you're absolutely right. And I work with young teens through NCSY, and the main thing I tell them is just have that relationship and have that conversation. And you could talk in any way you want because it's God. But as long as you're aware that there is a conversation to be had and there is a person to speak to or speak with, that's fundamental. So,
yeah. Well, okay, Shabbos. Any last words? Anything you want to talk? Yeah, how about this? I mean, unless you have last words, but my last thing is maybe talk to people who are facing anti-Semitism, whether it's on campus, whether they're just a Jew in Manhattan walking down the street, or in Israel, or they're online and someone's like, oh, the Nazis should have killed you. Like, someone facing anti-Semitism, what words of inspiration would you give to them to continue?
So during a really rough period at Harvard, I had private armed security outside my house for about a week. And my parents kept calling saying, just come back home for a bit and just come back home. And I made a decision that day, and I'll talk directly to the camera, that I am not going to change my behavior, my attitudes, or my actions to accommodate other people's bigotry, hatred, and discrimination. I'm not the problem. I have nothing to apologize for. It is the anti-Semites. It is those who have such a unvarnished hatred for Jewish people who should be put in the spotlight and should be held accountable. But why should I do anything differently? And that's sort of my main message. Don't do anything differently. If you wear a kippah, keep your kippah on. If you wear a Star of David necklace, wear that Star of David necklace. Don't be intimidated or scared or embarrassed. It sort of reminds me of a line by Winston Churchill that I'm going to paraphrase and butcher, where if these are the enemies that you're making, you're doing a good job. If the people who are chanting glory to the martyrs, globalize the Intifada, and Palestine is Arab, if they don't like me, good. That's actually a sigh of relief that they don't want me in their group chats and they don't want me in their classrooms and they're telling me that I don't belong here. So for all Jews, whether it's on a college campus, whether it's in their professional setting, regardless of your age, gender, wherever you are, be proud to be Jewish. This is a defining moment, not just in our lifetimes, but for the Jewish people and in Jewish history. And now is the perfect opportunity to stand up, to be counted, and to say that I'm not going anywhere.
Beautiful. Shabbos, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Whoa. Okay. Thank you for coming on this week's journey, this week's episode with us. If you're watching this on YouTube, please comment the word brave, because that's what Shabbos is. He is brave. Shout out again to our sponsors, our favorite software company, Bitbean. Go ahead and reach out to them. Twillory, the best place to get your best threads. Use our code for $18 off. And of course, the wonderful Hiring for Less. Go give them a call so you get that first week 50% off. And of course, thank you to the largest Torah spreading organization in the world, Torah Anytime. Please go donate. I made it through the entire episode without making any corny jokes about Shabbos' name, so I'm proud about myself. But on a more serious note, kudos to Shabbos for standing up for what he believes in. And you can see he's questioning Harvard, but he's also questioning Hashem, and he's talking to him, and he's having that dialogue, which is so important. I think the root of this episode that I personally am taking out of this is the world might seem like it's going out of control. Our haters are being even more vile and loud right now, and it's okay if you're having a hard time. That makes sense. This is all a message from Hashem. What is it? I'm not exactly sure, but no matter how difficult it may be, continue to be proud to be a Jew and continue to dig inside you and realize you can be an inspiration for the nation. Go ahead and share this episode with people who you think would enjoy it. Get chizik from it. Love it. L'chaim.
Living L'chaim.